Lewis doesn't celebrate success either particularly, but I've seen this in a few individuals. There are individuals whose sole goal it is, I just want to win a Formula One race. That's my goal. I want to win a Formula One race. And here's what happens. You win it, and there's nothing beyond that goal. With Lewis, the reinvention is because, and it's part of the reason why he has won as many championships as he has, because you have to want it with all your heart, and you can't be satisfied with one. You've got to keep changing and adapting, because you know that the driver that's in P2 will change and adapt.
I am overjoyed to have James Vowles on the pod today, our team principal of Williams Racing, a strategic mastermind with decades of Formula One experience on the pit walls and now leading one of the sport's most iconic teams back to greatness, we hope. James, we're going to start, if you will, by talking about your moment in time, because I have a feeling that all the gold is going to come from there. So if you were to pick this one moment which sort of, I suppose, identifies everything about where you've got to in this world, what would it be?
First of all, thank you for that intro. If you send me your bank details later, I will get a down payment.
Oh, that could be significant from the world of Formula One. I will.
It was quite a good intro, if I may say. My moment in time. So my moment in time is what led to me being here today. It was back in end of 98, early 99, which it's a coincidence, but it's not at the same time. It's also an era where Williams was incredibly strong. And at the time, this was the team that I followed. And you'll see how that intertwines and becomes an interesting way that life developed. But my moment in time was I was at university, I was doing a degree, I was doing mathematics, computer science. And I woke up and just questioned everything about what I was doing, really. I just got to that point where I was fine at what I was doing. I was good at mathematics. I was good at computer science. I was doing it because my projection was the world would need that in the next 20 years. It's probably a safe avenue to go down. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't enjoying it. It was, I needed something that led me to be fulfilled for the next 50 years of my life. And my moment in time was really that, and it really was one day. I woke up and I thought, that's it. I'm going to make a change now. I'll finish this degree, but I need to do something with my life where I don't question what I'm doing day on day, where I feel as though I'm making a difference to myself, but also I leave my mark on the world. Because it goes back to a really big existential question, which is, why are we here and what are we doing? And the conclusion I came to is to leave the world in a better place. And in my opinion, to do something that is changing beyond the remit of just your own life. And so I looked at what that meant and what the implication was. But for me, to be a part of an elite sport, by elite I mean some of the best athletes in the world rather than anything else, to be a part of Formula One and make a difference. So not just be there for the numbers, but really contribute in a way that actively changes what the sport is doing. That's what I want to make my life into and change. And so it woke up, wrote 11 letters to 11 Formula One teams. I've said this elsewhere, I got rejected by 11 Formula One teams, but 2 teams came back with some really interesting advice. And one is where I'm sat here today.
So one of those teams was Williams. What was the other team? Which was the other team?
It was British American Racing, which is where I started my career. So both came back. Everyone else was, and it was lovely. I remember it. I wish I kept them. I don't think I have. But you know when you get a really nice lettered paper that's really thick, that's what I had.
Quality paper.
Quality paper, and I thought, this is brilliant. And it was every time an envelope arrived, you sort of got a little bit excited. And then invariably opened it up, and it was pretty much, for the most part, thank you, we'll keep your CV on file, but we have no place for you at the moment. And the 2 differences were British American Racing and Williams, because the letter back was, we don't have a place for you, but here's why. And it was fundamentally, you're a graduate, we don't really take graduates on. No one knows how you got into Formula One. You're about 35, but we don't take graduates on. And then number 2 is, it's interesting what your background is, but it's not really applicable to us. You need engineering in it as well, because we're only, at the time, teams were 200, 250 people, and we need engineering to be one of the strengths that you bring to the organization. So it was clear direction, which then completely changed what I did with my education, changed how I approached probably the next 3-4 years of my life, and then led me into Formula One.
Do you know what it also does? It sort of signifies what that family business, which it very much was at the time in Williams, what it was in terms of its culture and how it approached even somebody who it was rejecting, how it would go about doing that. Do you think that somehow played a part in you accepting this job so many years later in terms of understanding what this team is all about and why you would want to be a part of it?
In a small way, probably the larger aspect to it was this was a team that when I was younger I looked up to, because it's invented technology that's on my word car today, probably your word car today. It was a giant of the sport that had tripped and fall over, but it was a giant of the sport. So a lot of me wanting to come here was that it's an icon, but more, and as important, probably not more important than that, an icon that has the right investment to win championships again. So it was everything coming together in the right time frame that led to me being interested in returning and coming here. So
I mean, it can work either way, can't it? A rejection letter. Either it can be character building and build that sort of resilience in you to sort of strive for what you're being rejected on the basis of, or it can just turn you off completely. So what was it about it that still made you think? Because some people would have gone, oh, okay, this is too much like hard work, I'm moving forward. But I guess those people don't end up in Formula One. What was it about that experience that, the character building resilience nature of it that sort of led you to persist?
I mean, when you have lettered paper that's that good, Georgie, you know it's going to be a good place. No, it was, I'm a persistent, annoying chap, and I don't really take no for an answer. And I knew in my head and my mind that I needed something that really fulfilled me, a job that wasn't a job, it was a passion. And so I couldn't see myself working in finance. I couldn't see myself working in a number of industries. I had to do something that I felt had meaning. And so the rejection letters did nothing more to me than that. So I put them up on the wall, all of them, all 11 were up on my wall, and stayed there for a few years until I got into Formula One. So effectively from the point, so I didn't have a poster of a Ferrari or otherwise, which was atypical at probably that time of that generation. But mine was, I would wake up and I would go to sleep thinking that this is where I wanted to be, and the no's I would make into a yes.
Did you take them all down when you got your first job in Formula One?
Actually, I moved out of university. That's why I can't remember where they are. But
They're in a box in the garage somewhere.
that's the thing. I've been trying to rack my brains because it'd be a brilliant thing to show the world, because they were brilliant. I don't know where they are today. So I took them down, but I took them down to the point where I really finished that education and went into a second education at a different university, which was engineering. And so I'd already followed the pathway. So almost to a certain extent, the letters have done their job, whereby I've completely changed the direction of travel I'm going. And I was immersed in it. When I was at the second university, which was Cranfield University, actually, I was part of the BRDC. I was working with people in industry already. So to a certain extent, the letters have done their job. I'm not in yet, but I could see a pathway whereby I could find a job in Formula One.
And I know you said it was all just one day you woke up and you had this moment. But what had been leading up to that? Because clearly things had been leading up to that to allow you to even be in a place mentally where you were struggling with what might come next. And then to wake up and have this sort of epiphany of what you wanted to do with the rest of your life then came. So what was going on before that? What were you thinking about before that, or the day leading up to that led you to get to, that train of thought, which was, no, F1's my future?
It's a good question. It's not one that I really have a particular answer to. I am a little bit this way, by the way. I'll wake up one morning and go, right, I'm fixing this. That's done. That's all it is. The brain is fascinating. For me anyway, when you sleep, it reorders everything. Depends how you are as a human being. For me, I actually wake up very ordered, very structured on forget all of that. That is not important whatsoever at all. What is important is the next 50 years of your life. And it wasn't anything that happened the day before. It wasn't a shock moment. It wasn't that anything bad even particularly happened over the last week prior to that. Because typically for me, that's not how these things build up. It's very personal to me. It's different for every individual. It would have just been that I have one life, we all have one life, and I'm not living it to where I should be. Or I certainly can't see anything in what I'm doing today that will draw the amount of passion that I have in me to do everything possible. So that's sort of where it came from. I assume it's just a build-up of 14 months worth of looking at mathematical formulas and programming languages that led me there. That would do it.
That would do it, as you well say. But since those rejection letters, I mean, what has happened has been phenomenal, and it is obviously to do with serious hard graft as well as opportunity, maybe a little bit of luck along the way as well. But taking these opportunities as and when they present themselves, and then doing the right job in that position. Because when I look back at your story to date, and I say to date because there's still hopefully plenty more to be written here, successfully speaking wise, but you were such a key part of that Brawn storyline. 8 straight Constructors' Championships with Mercedes since then, and 7 drivers' titles. I mean, there must be moments where you pinch yourself that kid that woke up that morning not knowing which direction to take, but thinking it might well be Formula One, is now where you are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, I always say this, I'll say this 100 times. It's a fantastic journey I've been on, but I've had people in and around me that are and that's what I love about the sport. All of us were pushing in the same direction together. It's no one person that will ever change a Formula One team. I really do maintain that. I have the privilege of heading this one, but it's not one person that drives a Formula One team. It's actually what you have with your peers around you, all pushing the same direction, and that's what I love about the sport. I do. Definitely, I've been fortunate to have the career I have. There's many people that have joined Formula One for as long as I have and haven't even won a race. I've lost count. It was over 120, but I've had the privilege of being part of a team winning over 120 races. There's many that have never won a championship. And then there's many that will never really experience what we went through as Brawn. And it would take the whole podcast to go through it. But there literally was a story, a race that was fascinating. And it was fairy tale stuff. And just an incredible moment in my life. And answering your question, I mean, before this, you asked me what my moment was, and I was reflecting on it. There were many, because there really were many that formed me into who I am today. Second, probably in those lists, was not when I signed a contract to come to Williams, but it was actually when I walked underneath the archway with Williams written on it to walk into this building. And even now talking to you, I have goosebumps remembering that moment, because it was everything that I did and what I've just presented to you there at university, changing my life. And it was hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was sleeping in the car sometimes to get myself where I needed to be to work. Simple as that. I had a car, which was useful, but I needed to get around the country. But everything that I did on that journey is what allowed me to walk through the door here in 2023. So I see everything almost as just a build-up of a journey that ultimately led me to an opportunity that existed here. So that was one moment in time. One was definitely winning in Brawn. I think actually not even winning. I remember so vividly the emotion when we built the car and we took it to Silverstone to test, and we heard it fire up. There were people in tears, because that was hard, really hard that year. And so I really like moments in time that have what I can reflect on as an emotion, a real strong emotion attached with them at the same time, such that, as I say, I have goosebumps talking about it. That's a moment in time, because you realize how much it defined who you are as an individual today.
When did you know in that Brawn storyline that it was going in the direction that it went in? Because it was the most dramatic of setups. It was the most dramatic of storylines. And then, of course, it had this sort of magical beginning, and then everyone panicked sort of halfway through that was going to sort of tail off and it wasn't going to reach the conclusion we were all desperate for it to reach. And then it did. It came good. So what was that roller coaster like for you guys who were living it and breathing it and just doing everything to get yourselves where you needed to be to stay on top?
So I guess the first thing is, for those that were sort of part of at least the performance elements of the car, we all knew the car would be, if we could build it, incredibly quick, because it'd been in 3 wind tunnels for a year fundamentally beforehand. And so that was clue number 1. It'll be quick. You didn't develop a car that way. You used one. You weren't restricted, but most people used 1 wind tunnel. We didn't. We had 3 teams, 2 wind tunnels in the UK, 1 in Japan, working 24/7. So you had an idea it'd be quick. Clue number 2 came when you started to see car launches, and the cars looked like what we had a year before that. So effectively, it was way off. So that was the beginning of the year. We knew that would be strong. No one in the team, and by the way, on emotion, we were 900 people, and no one from the 900 people left. A little bit over 900. But the day we left to go to Melbourne 450 people were made redundant in another team. And what I'd always appreciate during that year is individuals knew that they may not have a job in a few months' time, and not a single one disappeared. They all worked their hardest in order for us to have a car that was the car that you saw there.
And what keeps a team like that there? What keeps those people galvanized and together? What is it in the culture that makes that happen?
The key behind it all is that you have to be, above all else, aligned with what the end goal of it is. So I'll take a step back from that. I like to use the word legacy a lot. I like to use it here as well. My job here is to leave this team in a better place than when I joined, I hope. And my shirt at one point, I'll take that off and it'll be someone else's to take the mantle on and move forward with. So it's about legacy. And it's the same within Brawn. We all wanted to, whether you had a continuation beyond February or not, we all wanted to have our DNA, our fingerprint effectively in the sport contained forever. And it meant the world to us. And even if we couldn't join that journey, someone else's would be better as a result of the work that we've been doing. So it goes back to that very fundamental thing that I said much earlier. It's important for me to leave, to make a difference beyond my own life, but a difference to other people's lives. Still fascinating that drove everyone, but it really did. There was just a wanton desire for that car to go out and hit the track. Answering your question, when did I know? It wasn't after the first 6 races. I knew people would catch us. In fact, you could see them catching us awfully quickly. We weren't spending the money we needed to build updates. Monza, I'll remember it vividly. By that point, we hadn't won a race for ages, particularly. I think, if I remember in sequence, Rubens won Valencia, but it was more a little bit of fortune falling our way more than car performance. And we got to Monza, and basically we doubled down on, it was back in the days where you qualified with fuel in the car. So we qualified, I think it was 8th and 9th. I do apologize, it might be 9th and 10th, but it was top 10 with both cars on a one-stop strategy. So forget everyone else that's going for the 2. We are going to do our own race and go for the 1. And it was high risk. You could see it in all the calculations. It was, you're in the carbon zone, you can get taken out. But if it pays off, you get a 1-2 out the race. And a 1-2 would probably cement our championship. And when we got through that weekend, I remember it vividly. That was the moment where, to a certain extent, I relaxed and went, it's within our destiny and control to do this now. It's possible to do this now. So it wasn't a guarantee, but it was a strong feeling that we'll be in a positive place.
I've just realised that you've got a whole new audience in Formula One because of Drive to Survive, and there'll be some stories that they don't yet know, and so the Brawn story goes way back. So just actually surmise for me what happened with that team that year, because I think it's really important if someone's new to the sport to actually put this in context, because it's like if you're a football fan, it's like Leicester City winning the Premier League. It's such a big story.
So Formula One, if I showed you a map of all the Formula One teams that have won since probably 1970, you'll see a few things in there. You'll see Williams, you'll see McLaren, you'll see Ferrari. This is before Mercedes really were running correctly. You won't see much else. That was pretty much it. It was really, there's a few other little teams that won for 1 or 2 years. So for example, Renault won in 2005, 2006. That was it. It was dominated by giants of the sport. And it's dominated by, even in a year, a team could slightly move forward, but you'd be gazumped by teams out there that have more resources and more ability to do. We didn't have a cost cap. We could spend what we wanted back then, pretty much. And so we were Honda, and Honda, this is the financial crisis, end of 2008, decided we're not continuing there. We weren't the only team. There was another team that also ceased. And so we're basically, we were redundant overnight. The team was about 900 people, and 900 jobs were made redundant overnight. Now, that happens to many businesses around the world, and it was a financial crisis that happened back there as well. But what's different in sport is there was a team effectively that was on its knees. And it came, the way I see it, is a phoenix rising from the ashes. There wasn't a person there that didn't want to go on and show the world that we're able to do this. And it needed support. At the time, Mercedes was with McLaren, and they would provided engines for us. And the real true story, took the chassis and cut the back of the chassis off to fit the Mercedes engine. It didn't fit. So there were just stories that you just couldn't believe we were doing this. A lot of the car, of course, the carbon tub was built for the Honda engine, so cut the back off, put the Mercedes one on, adapted everything around the Mercedes engine in order to get it fitted in. Seatbelts, some steering wheel bits, some brakes, all taken off show cars. We didn't have all the bits in there because we had no money. We're now effectively, as far as you go, the roller shutters are down, but we had to build a racing car, and so we did. So it just took, there were moments in time where you see 900 people pull together and do the impossible. That's what happened when the car was built. And then there was just 1,000 stories from then onwards. We knew the car was quick, but we went to Silverstone. And I remember it vividly. It's the first time the car was running. Jensen was driving it. We used the small circuit. We couldn't afford the big circuit, so we used the tiny little Stowe circuit, which is where you go in a Formula 4 car. You don't go there in a Formula 1 car. I remember high performance powertrain. So HPP were with us. They're used to obviously these lovely setups. And I think I handed one of their engineers a radio and he said, "Where do I set up?" And I said, "There's a back of a truck there. Off you go. That's what you're going to use." We didn't have anything. It was like a sort of cheap Formula 4 team just setting up and getting going. And we took exactly the same car, exactly the same tires. It worked flawlessly. Put it in the back of the truck, drove it to Barcelona, where everyone else had been testing for 2 weeks all over. They weren't just Barcelona. They were testing in Jerez and a few other places. Turned up on our old tires. And the first 10 laps that Jensen did, we were 3.5 seconds faster than anyone else on the timesheets. A number that doesn't exist, impossible to exist in any physical world, and yet we were. And it's, I mean, the fairy tale moments were, A, we got a car. B, the car was quick. C, we only had 2 bits, 2 front wings, 2 rear wings, 2 chassis. That was it. If anyone drove into us or we crashed any of the races, it was finished. It was done. That season would have ended. And so for that to not happen, and you look at modern day Formula 1 and realize that happens quite a bit, is also extraordinary. Obviously, we had more spares as the season went on. It was just for the first, I think, 4 or 5 races, we were very, very much unable to work within the spares we had. And then we put enough money together. There was enough money from the transition from Honda to Braun, then buy enough parts to effectively go racing. But the fairy tale part of it is, it's the same as Leicester City. It's a tiny organization that comes together and does the impossible. No one, you look at all the winning sheets for the Premier League for the last 50 years, Leicester doesn't exist on it. So for it to come together in the way it does is extraordinary.
Yeah, thank you, James, for explaining that from your side, because it is, like you say, the most phenomenal story. And I don't know if it'll happen again in our lifetime or beyond, because it was so extraordinary and so wonderful to see a team galvanize in the way that that happened. And so then what it morphs into, of course, is Mercedes later, and all of these championship titles and all of these drivers' titles and everything. What people talk a lot about not learning as much from success as you learn from failure. What were the biggest takeaways from your time with Mercedes? Because there was a hell of a lot of success and not much failure.
So it's an interesting cultural piece. We never celebrated any of the success. I personally didn't, but also I would say the senior leadership team that really defined what Mercedes was never celebrated any of the success. And to put some tone on that, there was a board on the front entrance which displayed every win that we had in the season, of which some of those years it was 16 wins, a lot of them. The day after the season finished, that was cleared. It's done. That's behind us. So you didn't even celebrate the championship, and you didn't celebrate the championship in the year because there's next year, and we want to win next year.
Okay, so I've got one question about that. That's super admirable, but is it enjoyable?
It's an interesting one. I'm okay with it, but I'm built that way. So I even when there's, so I mean, these are all management book bits I'm going to read out, but people remember failure about 10 times more powerfully than they remember success. So when you do one negative, it completely outweighs the positive. I don't think of negative and positivity that way, but the way I think about it was sort of in the tone that you've just suggested, which is, every time we've made a mistake, and I don't mean that you've intentionally done something that will lead to a mistake. What I mean is you had every good intention. Either you've done an experiment that's right on the limit and it fails, or you've tried something and it's failed. The learning I've personally had out of the failure is now that I treat as 10 times more powerful than success. Because the problem with success is it doesn't tell you how close you were to failure or what was going on either side, or even the downside of it. And close calls just don't mark you as well as this went horribly wrong. And when it goes horribly wrong, you never want it to happen again. And as a result of that, you put an amount of effort and passion into fixing it that you wouldn't have done if you won. And I'll give you real world examples of that. We sometimes won races by 20 seconds, and sometimes we won races by 5 seconds. We didn't go through the races where we won by 5 seconds and dissect it and figure out why are we 25 seconds worse off relative to our competitors. It was, we've won. Okay, there's some things to learn, but we're going to move on to the next one. But when you lose, now that marks you. We shouldn't be. Well, there's no way we should be. We normally win by 30 seconds. And now all of a sudden you turn it on its head and you want to absolutely get into the nature of it. And I think when that happened once or twice, we turned it on its head to, you can start finding fault with a lot of what you're doing. And if you do it constructively and use the feedback learning loop from the back end of that, you can make yourself into a much, much stronger entity as the result. So
how do you do that without pulling too much negativity into it? Because there's constructive stuff, and then there's praise, and there's then the negativity piece. How do you make sure you don't focus too much on the negative stuff?
So this is personal again to me, and it's now within Williams, but a lot of it, again, I would say senior leaders in Mercedes embraced, which is to say, no one individual will ever be fired. It's cultural. No one individual will be fired for failing. That's not going to happen. You may be if you blame someone else or you hide something, because you're doing the complete opposite of the whole learning loop. But you almost put someone, this is now Williams I'm talking about, someone fails in this environment here, and it's for good reason. In other words, we've learned from it. In fact, we've learned a tremendous amount, and they have put in a feedback loop that actually says, here's what I've done, here's why I've done it wrong, I put my hand up, sorry about that, but this is what I've learned from it. This is for you, just to avoid it happening. I put them up on a pedestal, effectively display into the company and say that failing is how we are going to move forward. And effectively, there's another theory, which is fail fast, but I completely buy into that sort of methodology. And it's cultural, answering your question, because you can get satisfaction out of failure because the learning you get from it is so powerful. And if you embody that. But if you look at most companies, if you look at most of the world, and football's sort of probably one of the more extremes on this one. When you fail, the strength of the world pushes you down so hard because you can't fail. Failing's a bad thing. You can't do that. That now what happens is you are so afraid of failing that you operate within smaller and smaller bounds to make sure that you're not pushing the limits as a result of things. Now you're even worse off than you were before, fundamentally, because you're not even exploring the limits that allow you to understand how close you are to them. And so the way of dealing with it is that I happily say that I fail daily. I mean, it just happens. It's part of life. But what I would also happily say to everyone is some of the best things I've ever done in my life is fail, because it's made me into who I am today, because I always had the support of peers around me in those circumstances. And probably vivid examples of it are, I went on a team radio to explain to a driver, we failed, that's on me, but let's move forward together, in order to create a structure around them that allowed them to know that the whole world is behind them, and actually to demonstrate what I believe in with all my heart, which is I can guarantee you that failure will hurt me forever, but I'll remember how I've learned and changed myself as a result of it, which is the more powerful bit. So bringing that all together, because it's a very wordy answer, it's a cultural thing. You need strength around you. It's not just about one individual. You need to have a method where you can take the learning and feed it back to other people, because that's the really important bit. It's not a failure. It's the learning that's the really important bit. But I believe it made me into who I am today.
Yeah, I read somewhere that you said that at some stage you just became too comfortable at Mercedes, which made the decision to move to Williams when the opportunity presented itself, a sensible one to take. How hard is it to leave success behind, though, when you're building something that you can see as just is forever going in a particular direction, and there's more accolades and more trophies? I mean, how hard is it to go, oh no, I'm going to shut the door on that and I'm going to challenge myself with this?
I made the decision pretty quickly. I'm talking within a day or two.
So was it a gut instinct thing as much as anything else?
No, it goes back into, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to make a difference to the world. And Mercedes is fantastic. It's got a great leader in Toto. It's got a great structure of senior leaders there. And I was fortunate to be a part of that. But we were tuning in millimeters. You would really find small details. In fact, you were so worried about changing too much because it might break the system you've got. And that's not me all over. I wanted to leave my fingerprint on the sport, my DNA as a part of the sport. I want to leave the sport and a team in a better place than when I started. And there's not that much room to grow within Mercedes of doing that because it's such a successful entity.
Mm.
But Williams, with the right investment, has both the history and the scope to become incredible. And so that opportunity appears, in my opinion, once in a lifetime. And the result of it is that's what drove me to it. It's more, it goes back to the legacy item. I believe I can leave a strong legacy here. I can leave Williams in a better place than where it started. I'm on the right journey for that. And that will be far more rewarding to me than anything I've done before. Winning a championship as Williams, I'll remember that. Don't get me wrong, I love all the championships I've been able to win. But doing it from a state where we have to be blunt, Williams was the last team. Taking a team and really turning it around to that level, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I couldn't turn it down.
You've been at Williams for 2 years now. And you, like you just mentioned, you're in the process of a rebuild. You've been really, really open about that. When you did do that sort of goosebump, as you've described it, walk under the arch at Grove with Williams overhead, what did you find there that you knew you instantly had to change? And how do you go about taking an organization like that and incrementally making the right changes and prioritizing what changes need to come first? Where do you start on that mission?
They're good questions. It took me quite a while to get my hands wrapped around enough of Williams to actually figure out what, even prior to order, we change. I mean, putting it bluntly, because the team already knows nothing is at championship level here. Nothing. And for good reason. It didn't have investment for 20 years. It's not suddenly that you can hope that a small tribe without the same finances of the giants has managed to add some things. There's some clever little areas that have been developed, but not one single area was a championship level. And that I'm talking about commercial or the infrastructure or machines or even the culture that goes behind it, the systems, the data, none of it. Answering your question, I'm very data-led. So the first thing was making sure everything had data wrapped around it. And what I mean by that is our business is weird. That's what I like about our business. But if you sort of took the 1,000 people the teams are, about a third of it is production of bits on site. About a third of it is designing of the bits on site and some aerodynamics, a little bit more than that as well, your aero teams, over 100 people. And then around that, you've got your effectively your IT infrastructure, your finance, your HR, and your commercial teams sort of bubbling all together. And this team had those functions, but it wasn't integrated at all together. And it really is, to get success in any business or in any sport, you need every single person in the team working together, pointing the right way. That's just rule number one. And so I think the first step of all of this is that make sure that the word silos is basically what was created here. Break every single silo down. That's number one. Number two is wrap data around everything. So I want to know how long it takes to build a front wing and how much it costs. They're basic questions. But a front wing is about 400 components. It's not one component. And it probably goes through 1,000 different stages of build. Every single one of those, we need to know how long it takes, what it costs, where it goes, where things are. Sounds simple, but actually it's fairly complex to do that when you're talking about 20,000 car components. But the beauty of it is it then starts to allow you to understand where your big holdups, where your big gains that you can be finding, and where do we have to put our investment. And that was sort of the first few months was the cultural piece, which includes bringing in some really strong leaders that know what good looks like in the sport, because Williams has a passion beyond anything I've ever experienced. It's incredible here. You walk through the building and you can feel it. And I know this is getting very odd as a description for someone that's based in science, but you really can. The people here want this to be a successful organization. And that's great. That didn't meant I didn't have a lot of work to do to change that part of thing. So maybe I'm wrong. What was championship materials, the passion people drive with? Just we were driving in the wrong direction and against each other many of the times. So those are the big things to change, which I think probably if you look at any company that's been through this, those are probably the main things you need to be changing everywhere. Understand what you're really doing with it and start bring in excellent leaders and start changing the culture. They're the three things that you do pretty much in every business. What then became apparent is just how far behind we are in most areas. And then that's really now you can't do everything at once, because there is something is in your question, but there is something called change saturation. You literally can't change at a rate higher than what the organization can take, because you will break it beyond belief. And in my first year here, I pushed it too far. We added a lot of technology and really didn't have a car at the back end of it. So it's about making sure that you do things at the right rate, that we have to compete on a world stage and we have to compete with the car. So it's finding the balance.
Is it harder to do the job that was done at Brawn during that season? Or is it harder to come into an organization like Williams, which has all this heritage, all this sort of, a past, and you have to rebuild? I mean, it's because what you're trying to do, I guess, at Williams is also create a sustainable future for a team. Whereas at Brawn, I don't know whether or what the intention was beyond that season. So what your experiences of having gone through a very well-oiled machine in Mercedes, but also then this Brawn experience, which do you draw on more for what you need to do at Williams?
This is strange as it sounds. So it doesn't really have a lot in common with the Brawn one, because it's quite different there. We actually had good infrastructure machines, just we had to shrink ourselves down and had no money. This is actually more, it's not quite true either. It has more in common with Mercedes in 2010, 2011 and 2012, where we weren't particularly good, but we're building the team up at the same time. It has a lot more in common to do with that. Again, I was fortunate to be a part of that journey and that rebuild, and there's a lot of what I'm taking from there is what I'm using here today. But I think I've been fortunate that I have a board that believe and trust in me. There's probably someone with more what I would call merger and acquisition experience that may have been able to do a faster job than me on the initial part, because you don't need F1 specific knowledge. It's really a business and running a business. We're through that now, and I've learned a tremendous amount of skills that will help me in the future should I find another company that's close to bankruptcy that needs to be rebuilt. But
is that the steepest learning curve that you've been on in recent times? That piece?
Undoubtedly. Yeah, I was... the essentials are still the same, as in it's about culture and people. That's what this organization, most businesses are about as well. The machines are an output of culture and organization and people. But so those fundamentals remain in place, but you just can't do it all at once, and you've got to structure things correctly and understand where to put investment in the right way. And so that was very much a good learning journey for me, and the most I've challenged myself in the space of 24 months, which is what we've been through now. We're on the other side of that, because I'm fortunate now to have a really strong team of leaders around me that are all taking their share of the respective areas. But answering your question more directly, it is definitely more difficult to do this because you have carryover from what you used to know. And that's one of the most dangerous things, unfortunately. It's I love our past, but I'm making our future together, and our future is very different to what happened before.
Yeah, and it is, like you say, it's an extraordinary past with so much to be proud of. But like you say, you're trying to move things forward. Everyone keeps talking about 2026. Everything is focused around 2026. Does that mean you sacrifice 24 and 25 to get 26 right? Or how does that work for a team like you guys?
Short answer, yes. Because a lot of, probably the day I joined, I signed off a new simulator, very expensive simulator. But it'll come online in a few months. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is that's from 2023 to mid 2025. It's fundamentally, by the time you do what's required around it in terms of simulation technology infrastructure, that's the lead time in Formula One. And it took a bit of, that was an easy one, because immediately I could see a shortfall in what we needed in those areas. But what we have in Formula One, you don't go and buy, unfortunately, from Argos, if people still go to Argos. You don't buy from your high street stores. You need it custom made for your purpose, and you need it not for now, but what the regulations will look like in the future. And it takes a little bit of time. So it's not a finance problem. I am so incredibly fortunate with Dalton that they have the vision to invest what is required. We're not financially limited. We are cost cap limited. So everything that holds me up is just how much we can do in a year. And if cost cap wasn't here, you can actually do the transition much, much quicker. But the facts are, over half of your budget is spent just building a racing car and racing it. That's just life. And we have to do that because there's no such thing as stepping from last to first. That does not, I know Bourne was on that direction, but it was still a Honda beforehand and we were still midfield. you've got to do things as a progressive step, and therefore your people, your culture, your human resources, your team moves in conjunction year by year with your performance as well at the same time, in my experience. So the reason why I bring that all up together is that we still have to build a car, still have to race it, but the 24 and 25 cars didn't have much attention on purpose. There were some technology changes, fairly significant technology changes, which, as you can see, it's moved us up the grid. We are now fighting for points every weekend near enough. Bahrain wasn't a good example of that. So that's good. But I call that almost low-hanging fruit that we just picked up along the way. The really lovely things is the infrastructure that comes online in 2026, 27 and 28. And that's the time frame we're talking about. That's the time frame before much of this is all kicked into gear. Because people took quite a bit of time initially to bring the right people in, find the right culture, build our culture. It has to be our Williams. It's not my Williams, it's our Williams. That's now developed. We're now having ideas that are appearing hour by hour of, have we thought about this? Can we do this? How do we move this forward? Which that generation of ideas is then what accelerates your change and your growth. And that's happening as we speak. Then on top of that, you put infrastructure and facilities that wraps around all of that to give you the acceleration you need. And it just takes a bit of time to get in place. But it meant that 24 and 25 cars are really not a good example of what this team can do when everything is complete.
So 2026, 27, what are we talking about? Where do you want to be? Where do you expect to be at that point in time? And I know, like you say, you've got the patience of people with money behind you. You've got the buy-in of all of that. You know, the team is in a good place culture-wise. And great drivers, great driver pairings. So where do you expect to be in the next couple of years?
I haven't put a again, this sounds strange.
Well, now's a good time, James. Now is a good time.
Yeah, we'll let this be. Here's what I can tell you, because I think it will give you a better idea as to where my head is at. I'm less interested whether we're fourth or third in those years. Less interested. What I'm interested in is 2028 is a line in the sand that I've drawn where in fact, we've drawn, where we're in winning ways and we're profitable. So what I mean by profitable is that actually this is being run as a business, because at some point we should be a business, but Formula One is in a great place. So that's entirely possible. But I want it to be in winning ways by 28, because when I sketch out every single project plan that we have, I can see a way where everything is in place for us to be in a good place there. That does not mean that we won't have success in 26 and 27, just to reassure the world. But I think even what happened to McLaren, everyone looks at McLaren and goes, well, that took a year. The first investment was over 20 years ago. That's what happened to McLaren. It's really exceptional, extraordinary. And their really big transformation was at least 5 years between 2018, which is where Pat Fry, who's with me now, he was at McLaren at the time. So he was on this journey there. I'm incredibly proud of what they've achieved. And that shouldn't be, they're a competitor, but I am proud of what they've achieved because it's a symbol of what we can achieve here at the same time. But it wasn't 1 year. It's about 5 years of digging deep and just getting rid of what you've known for many years, replace it and get on with it.
And I did allude to the driver pairing that you've got, but as well, I mean, how encouraged are you by how competitive those two can be?
Yeah. I mean, if we start with Alex, I've been saying the world, he's a world-class driver for many, many years since I've been here. I knew him from 2016. But he really is a world-class driver. And I think what he's done at the beginning of this year against Carlos, and Carlos is benchmark. He's been against Charles. You can see where Charles and Lewis are. You can see where George is relative to Lewis. You can all start to piece it together, see how it all lines up. Carlos is world-class material. And Alex is demonstrating I can hold my own. Now, Carlos is coming up to speed, no doubt about it. And when I said to the world, I have two world-class drivers, two championship-level drivers, that the world sort of scuffed and went, you'll see that there's a better pairing in X, Y, and Z. I am very confident in the driver pairing that I have. It's not going to be what holds us up from winning a championship. What will be that is it's our responsibility to build a fast enough car.
Oh, that's really good to hear. I'm sure it's good for them to hear as well. In terms of Silverstone, because I must ask you about that, because this will be going out just before Silverstone. Home Grand Prix, a home team, of course. First ever Formula One victory there for Williams in 1979. So a ton of history to deal with. And again, Lewis, who's a driver that you've worked with for numerous years, obviously winning in that dramatic fashion and the Mercedes last season as well. So there's so much going on around that. What is it that you love about Silverstone? What is it that you hope for this year? What are your reflections, generally speaking, on what to expect there?
So there's the one thing that I absolutely love about Silverstone, and it's if you took your headphones off from where we're sat on the pit wall on the start-finish straight, I can almost tell you, I can't tell you the exact corner, but I can definitely tell you there's either an overtake or a crash that's happened, because from 3.5 kilometers away, I can hear the crowd screaming, roaring, cheering. The atmosphere that exists in Silverstone doesn't exist in any other circuits around the world. It is so unique to that circuit, the people that want to go there, that make the pilgrimage to go there, and it's extraordinary. That's what I love about it. You get this huge emotional feedback from the fan base as to what you're doing. It made it very weird in COVID, by the way, when we just didn't have many fans. There's nothing to. It's cars going around. Like, yeah, this is great. But you realize you're doing it for far more than cars going around. That's number one. Number two, what makes Silverstone really interesting is the unique set of corners you have. So Copse now is pretty much easy flats. That's turn 9 in Alcovency. But then you go through a sequence called Beckett's Church. And it's probably one... Suzuka's close with as you go up the S's at the beginning of it, but it's one of the most iconic set of curves that exist in Formula One in back-to-back sequence, where you're pulling over 4.5G, 4.5, and then it slowly comes down from 290 kilometers an hour to 250 to 230, and then you accelerate out of Church down Hanger Straight. I've had the privilege of driving there as well, of racing there, and being there in Formula One, and it's spectacular. There's very little like it. There's no room for error. It really pushes you to the limit. I love that about Silverstone. So there's sort of two elements. I think the circuit's great, promotes overtaking, really challenging corners, but also it's the fans make it.
I talked about Lewis just a moment ago, and the fact that you two have worked together over a number of years. And I remember reading somewhere that you'd said that every winter he reinvents himself, which is a great learning that you took from him. What did you mean by that? And where do you place him in the world of Formula One now and all time? And perhaps what do you expect from this Ferrari move? Because it'll be fascinating to see how that unfolds given some more time.
So you spoke of one of your earlier questions I didn't fully answer, but it will help answer that, was... wasn't it unenjoyable with the fact you never celebrated success? Lewis doesn't celebrate success either, particularly. But I've seen this in a few individuals. There are individuals whose sole goal it is, I just want to win a Formula One race. That's my goal. I want to win a Formula One race. And here's what happens. You win it, and there's nothing beyond that goal. So actually you get a downwards spiral that appears as a result of it. Then I've met Formula One drivers who I just want to win a championship, just a championship. Exactly the same. With Lewis, the reinvention is because... and it's part of the reason why he has won as many championships as he has, because you have to want it with all your heart, and you can't be satisfied with one. You've got to keep changing and adapting, because you know that the driver that's in P2 will change and adapt. They have to do more. You know the team in second will change and adapt, because what have they got to lose? They've already lost the championship. And actually the leader in all these circumstances needs to change as much or more than the remainder of the field. And that's what's embodied inside Lewis. And his change culture is more powerful than any individual I've met in my life. He will absolutely find out how else can I eke out more from what I'm doing at the moment. And we're into minutiae details now. But how do I get more out of what I'm doing in life? And it can be through food habits, through exercise, through training, through cutting out elements of your life that are just wasteful. It is just starting to optimize everything. And I'm not saying he leads the most interesting of lives, because he doesn't. He's cut a lot of it out. But it's how you become very successful year on year, and that success doesn't then stop you from dropping down from where you are. So that's Lewis all over, and it's what makes him very unique and special. The Ferrari move, I think he felt something similar to me, in a different way, of course, where he's done everything that you can possibly ever dream of doing with Mercedes, and actually the change for him reinvigorated him and created a new space. And I think it's great that he's moved to Ferrari. I think it's great for the sport. I think it's good for him personally, which is more interesting to me. And you'll see him, my opinion of it, is just getting better and better across the year, especially in the race. I think in the race is where he really shines. And there's still life in him yet.
Absolutely. James, just finally, will you recreate with me that meme which went crazy, which was Valtteri, it's James, but you can address me instead?
Excellent stuff. Yeah, that I will do it, but that was a strange part of my life. Yeah, that was Probably the biggest bit of, so Valtteri and myself are still today, we talk all the time. I think Valtteri's a lovely human being.
Yeah. No one has a bad word to say about him, do they? Everyone says good things about him.
Nor should they. But
No.
Anyway, Georgie, it's James.
There's no perfect note to end on that's better than that one. Marvellous. Thank you, James. You're an absolute star. I really appreciate it.
It's been lovely talking to you. Thanks for organising.